Let's take a look just for a second. Give me at least 2 minutes of your time.
We are interrupting CBS Mornings with some breaking news out
Apple.
of Washington. The Justice Department has just
Getting
filed
sued.
a landmark
Department of Justice, government.
suit against Apple. The Attorney General.
Let's see what they're talking about here. If you have not seen this or heard about this.
The Sherman Antitrust Act. Over the last 2 decades, Apple has become one of the most valuable public companies in the world. Today, its net income exceeds the individual gross domestic product.
Imagine a company called Grapes.
100 countries. That is in large part due to the success of the iPhone.
Grapes.
Apple's signature smartphone product.
Somebody started a company called
For
Grapes.
over a decade, iPhone sales have
Make it a
made up
high-D
the
company.
majority of Apple's
IT.
annual revenue. Today, Apple's share of the U.S. performance smartphone market exceeds 70%, and its share of the entire U.S. smartphone market exceeds 65%. Apple charges as much as nearly $1,600.
Yeah, iPhones are expensive.
But as our complaint alleges, Apple has maintained monopoly power in the smartphone market not simply by staying ahead of the competition on the merits, but by violating federal antitrust law. Consumers should not have to pay higher prices because companies break the law.
Give me an iPhone for $100. I'll take it. I'd pay $100 for an iPhone.
Anti-competitive conduct that hurts both consumers and developers. For consumers, that has meant fewer choices, higher prices and fees, lower quality smartphones, apps, and accessories, and less innovation from Apple and its competitors.
All right, we'll stop it there. Let's talk about this. Let's dive into the video, shall we? Hey, welcome back to another Tech Support Spy video. As always, we appreciate you watching. We ask, as always, share this video, help this channel to grow. And again, as always, we appreciate you watching Tech Support Spy. The government is mad. The government is like, oh, you dirty rat, you dirty rat. I don't know where I got that from. It just came to my head. It's from a old black and white 1922 movie. If you know what movie that came from, but I'm thinking of, because I can't think of the movie right now. I want to say maybe it might be Casablanca or Casablanca. I don't think it's in that movie, but it's some movie where the guy's like, oh, you dirty rat, you dirty rat. I don't know where that's from. If you know where that's from, help me out. Let me know what movie that quote is from. But the government is upset at Apple. Somebody, again, start a business called Grapes, and someone else start a business called Orange. Let's see what happens. Maybe Apple may start to partner with Grapes and Orange, and you guys can make your own fruit basket, right? So anyway, the government is like, hey, Apple is with the iPhones is basically taking over the smartphone market, and it's interesting to see how they're doing this. The government is like, hey, Apple is going against antitrust laws, and I'm not a lawyer, but we'll kind of dive deeper into why the government is suing Apple. I got an article that I want to go over, and then we want to take a look at the Sherman Act and talk about, or at least read and talk about Section 2 of the Sherman Act. But yeah, the government is like, hey, you guys have this wonderful product called the iPhone, and no one else can compete with you. There's a lot of iPhone users out there. I'm an iPhone user. But I also have friends that use the Android. The Android to me seems like a good product as well, but I've been using iPhone for so long. I think I first started out with like the iPhone 3, and I've been using iPhone ever since. And it is a remarkable product. But I'm curious to see and trying to understand more of why the government is suing Apple. It almost seems like, the government is talking to Apple and like, hey, your products are too good. No one else can compete with your product. But let's dive into an article and kind of read an article that kind of helps us better understand why the government is suing Apple. Let's take a look. All right, guys, let's dive into this. So as always, I usually read articles from PC World or PCmag, and this is a PCmag article. Kate Irwin is the article writer for this PCmag article. So she dives into Department of Justice, DOJ, sues Apple, arguing it makes third-party apps worse. The U.S. Department of Justice files a lawsuit against Apple, alleging it's violating antitrust laws with its iPhone by limiting third-party app functionality and performance. The U.S. Department of Justice is suing Apple for allegedly violating antitrust law According to its lawsuit filed Thursday in the New Jersey federal court, the DOJ alleges that Apple has blocked and suppressed third-party developers from being able to offer competing apps and services such as digital wallets on Apple iPhone device. So if you are a iPhone user or Android user, if you've used either or, there are some apps that work on an Android, but you can't use on an Apple iPhone. It's also allegedly taken steps to stop multifunctional super apps and has made it harder for iPhone or Apple Watch users to move to an Android device. So if you are wondering what an Apple or super app is, a super app is like the Lyft or the Uber app, right? A super app is an app that has multiple apps within one app. So it has multiple features, multiple things that you can do in one app. Instead of you having separate apps, right? You can have multiple apps in the one app. So, for example, the Uber app, and I'm on an iPhone. I'm sure the Android can use the Uber app as well. But with the Uber app, right, you can find someone within your area, your Uber driver, to come pick you up. But at the same time, you can call the Uber driver within the Uber app. You can message the Uber driver within the Uber app. So it can do multiple things within that one app. And that's what is ultimately a super app, super duper app. So it also talks about how the DOJ is also accusing Apple of purposely degrading interoperable messages or interoperable message quality between iOS and Android devices, and has reduced overall user privacy and security in an efforts to retain its dominant market status. So, I've been able to, since me being an iPhone user, has been able to text and message, my Android user or my Android friends. But I've been told sometimes that my message or text message from my iPhone, is not received from an Android user who's a friend of mine. So, if you are sending a message to an Android user and you're an iPhone user and they tell you don't receive it, and you got to send it to them multiple times, you start thinking there's a problem with the Android if you're an iPhone user, and you're like, why would I go to Android when it can't receive a message from my iPhone? I'm going to stick with the iPhone. Boo. you get what I'm saying. So it talks about how in Thursday's press conference with the Attorney General Merrick Garland, talks about the DOJ alleged that Apple is violating Section 2 of the Sherman Antitrust Act. We're going to take a look at that in just a second, citing exclusionary anti-competitive conduct that hurts both consumers and developers. The agency argues that Apple is simply making other products worse. The DOJ says Apple is also making consumers pay higher prices. Yes, iPhones are expensive. Paying $1,000 for a smartphone, I mean, that's, in my opinion, that's ridiculous. I can understand maybe $600, maybe $500, but $1,000 or $1,500 for an iPhone or for a smartphone. And granted, yeah, Apple makes great products, and the iPhone is a phenomenal smartphone. But man, are they expensive? Anyway, consumers should not have to pay higher prices because companies violate the antitrust laws. Attorney General Merrick Garland said in a statement, "We allege that Apple has maintained monopoly power in the smartphone market, not simply by staying ahead of the competition on the merits, but by violating federal antitrust law. If left unchallenged, Apple will only continue to strengthen its smartphone monopoly." So, in reading it, I'm not going to read this whole article here. I'll have the article in the description, but in reading this and kind of getting a more understanding of why the Department of Justice is suing Apple, I kind of get what they're saying, but let's see if we can compare what the Department of Justice is saying to the actual Sherman Act, the actual law. And I'm not a lawyer, but we're going to read it, and let's see if we can compare it. All right, so let's take a look at this. We are on the Department of Justice website. We're at the site justice.gov, one of their archive articles, which talks about the Sherman Act. So it talks about the competition and monopoly under Section 2 of the Sherman Act. And I am not a lawyer, so I'm not going to read this whole thing. I am not going to attempt to explain this verbiage to you and explain to you how it goes along with what the Department of Justice is trying to argue against Apple and how they are going against antitrust laws. But I do want you to see one thing out of here, out of this article, or this chapter 2 of the Sherman Act. So it talks about here. I want to start reading here. It talks about Section 2 serves the same fundamental purpose as the other core provisions of the U.S. antitrust law, promoting a market-based economy that increases economic growth and maximizes the wealth and prosperity of our society. As the Supreme Court has explained, the Sherman Act was designed to be a comprehensive charter of economic liberty aimed at preserving free and unfettered competition as the rule of trade. It rests on the premise that the unrestrained interaction of competitive forces will yield the best allocation of our economic resources, the lowest prices, the highest quality, and the greatest material progress. And they have some other areas where you can continue to read more. I'm not going to do that, but it kind of talks about how, within this section, right, it's promoting, growth from all companies that can provide services and material to us that, that it gives us best quality of life. We're not out here paying $1,500 for a phone. That's expensive, right? And you want to be able to have the best prices across the board. If you look at like different internet service providers like AT&T, Comcast, right? All the different internet service providers across the board, right? There's a competition there, a healthy competition between all those different companies to provide you internet service as well as cell phone service, right? And some may be cheaper than others. T-Mobile, right? Not saying they're cheap, but T-Mobile is a good internet service provider as well as a good cell phone provider. But understand there is competition there. You're not paying $1,500 for AT&T service, which I think AT&T is pretty good. Verizon is also a good cell phone provider as well, but you're not paying $1,500 for Verizon service over AT&T or T-Mobile or anybody else. So this is kind of what I'm interpreting of how the Department of Justice is looking at how Apple has basically taken over the smartphone market with their iPhones. They're great phones, but I'm starting to kind of see a little bit the Department of Justice argument in relation to Apple's iPhone and how they've basically, in the Department of Justice interpretation, they've monopolized the smartphone market. But let's see if they really have monopolized the smartphone market. Let's take a look at Forbes. All right, so take a look at this, right? This is Forbes. I found this article online, just kind of get an idea of like the top selling phones of 2023. So obviously the iPhone is the number one phone that's being sold in the world, right? And it talks about how the top 4 phones, iPhone 14, the iPhone Pro 14 and then 13 were the top 4 selling smartphones last year in 2023. But after that, it's all Android. And look how many Androids is being sold, right? The Galaxy A14, 12.4 million Androids sold in 2013. Yeah, can you compare that to, the Apple iPhone 14 Pro Max at 26.5 million? Yeah. To me, looking at this, right? The Apple iPhone, unfortunately, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, I think it is a better phone than the Android developed phones, but there are still sold Androids. Their Androids are still getting sold, right? So looking at this, right, you can almost go against what the government is saying. Like, where is it that, Apple is monopolizing the cell phone market where there is competition between at least Samsung and Apple in relation to the Android versus the iPhone? Androids are getting purchased. People are purchasing Androids and Samsung phones as well as people who are purchasing Apple iPhones. You know, just kind of shifting the thought and the mindset, right? In the argument. And I didn't pull up the full claim by the Department of Justice against against Apple, but again, they kind of talked about how some of the super apps aren't able to be used on an iPhone, and some of the messaging, you know, doesn't work, and it kind of, you know, limits iPhone users to deter them from going or leaving Apple and going to an Android. So those other factors there, you know, I can see a little bit about the argument that the Department of Justice has, but as far as monopolizing the smartphone market, I don't know about that. Seeing these numbers here in Forbes, right? You know, this is off Forbes.com. You know, Android phones are being sold. It's just, yeah, the Apple iPhone, people are buying them, but people are also buying the Android cell phones as well. So I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see what happens with this. You know, in my mind, I feel like this is an attempt from the government to legally push for Apple to lower the prices. The iPhones are expensive. I mean, you know, it's like you got to give up an arm and a toe just to get an Apple iPhone, you know, 8 right now, you know. So, but, you know, we'll see what happens with this. I hope this makes you understand a little bit more. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but, you know, based off the video and me attempting to read the section to at least portions of it, I hope this kind of gave you a better understanding of why the Department of Justice is suing Apple. And I got a better understanding of it too, just by me doing this video and speaking to you about it, because I was interpreting the same thing that I was reading, and I was interpreting it at the same time to then explain to you what I was thinking. So hopefully this helped. Hope you liked the video. Share the video with everyone you know, everyone that you love, your pets, your grandpas, your uncles, whoever. Tell them about Tech Support Spy, and thank you for watching Tech Support Spy.